That is my cue. Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you for coming to the senior class readings. Wow, last one of your careers here. Unbelievable. Can you all hear me? How's that? Better? Sorry about that. Whoa. This thing is a little loose. Be careful with this, readers. Welcome everybody. Get settled. Couple people still looking for seats. This is going to be really fun because I get to read their bios that are in litmus to you, and you get to find out more about all of our readers here tonight, secrets and things. Not really that. We're very excited to hear all of these seniors read. I'm Alan Rossi. I'm chair of the creative writing department. It has been 2 years in which this class has been working, just like all of our classes do, but with a sort of special devotion. They're interested in art beyond our classes. They're reading things beyond our classes, watching films beyond our classes, listening to music, and art is always on their mind. And I've been super impressed. My colleagues, Emily Cinquemani and Scott Gould, are teachers in the program. We can give them a round of applause. Have been super impressed by this class's devotion to art in our classrooms, but beyond it. I can't impress upon you how impressive this class has been. And we're super happy to celebrate them tonight. Okay, you're gonna hear a bunch of different things tonight, poems, stories, nonfiction. Sometimes you'll hear a couple different pieces. These are portfolio readings. We're trying to give you a look into not just one thing they've done, but a couple different things, and to show you their interest. And hopefully some of these bios will let you know a little bit more about these students. So, okay, without further ado, maybe silence your phones, flashes off, take a picture though if you like. Exits are over here. Buckle your seatbelts. I'm sorry. Okay, let's begin this. So, Joplin Gagne is from Greenville, South Carolina. Though their father claims they crawled out of the depths of hell. They love many things in life, including steak, bread, their family, and coffee. They have been recognized in the 2022 Scholastic Art and Writing Awards, in which they received a gold key, 2 silver keys, and an honorable mention. In the fall of 2023, they will begin their journey at UNCSA as an aspiring film director. Their real dream, and keep this a secret please, is actually just to sit in a director's chair wearing a sassy hat with a capuchin monkey named Missy perched on their left shoulder. Joplin Gagne.
Can everybody hear me all right? Okay. You all know who I am. I'm Joplin Gagne, and today I will be reading a fiction piece titled All Robots Want to Try Acid. Please note, when I say the name Shakespeare, I know you will be tempted to picture something like this, but I ask instead that you try your best to picture something more like this. Aunt Delia's beach house is warmer than usual when we return. Winter thaws into spring, and when I forget to close the doors and windows this time, a low, buzzing heat nestles in the corners of the house. Shakespeare and I sit together in the lab, fussing over a bottle of Instagrow. I smooth out the creases in the FDA rejection letter that lies beneath it. Shakespeare is arguing with me, but I'm exhausted and bitterly sober. I pinch the bridge of my nose and shake my head at him. Shakespeare, I don't understand why you want to try acid so badly, I say. I feel like a frazzled mother, overwrought, my hands calloused and my spine curved from years of labor. I feel like I'm arguing with my teenage son, whom I desperately want to understand, but our lives are too different now, and I've forgotten what it means to want things as powerfully as I did then. Shakespeare doesn't answer me. Of course he doesn't. I'm not speaking his language. The thing about robots is that they use pattern recognition, aka Shakespeare is a smartass and won't answer me unless I phrase things very specifically. Shakespeare, why do you want to try acid so badly? I say, you can't even feel. I can feel, he argues, and I know I must be imagining it, but it's almost like there's force behind his tone. This is something he needs me to understand. He says, I felt happy when you let me perform surgery on you, and when you taught me how to perform surgery. And after the surgery, when our neighbor Mrs. Dunlop heard the screams, came over and introduced herself and let me pet her cat. His name is Samuel. You don't even know what happy means, I say. It comes out more like a shout. I see myself for a moment as if from an outside eye. My hands are thrown up and my sparse hair is rumpled where I've dragged my fingers over it. My eyes are wide and wild. I feel something that I cannot see, like an ache in my chest that burns with the light of 1,000 really, really tiny matches. Shakespeare falls quiet. He holds his clawed hand out to me. It is empty, but waiting, so in his hand I place my own. I let him walk and I follow. He leads me to one of the rooms I seldom enter. The door is already ajar. There are canvases, many of them, laid out on the floor, on easels, and on the bed, which has been covered with a tarp. My feet grow roots in the doorway. Shakespeare paints. I have no other word to describe it, though it feels bigger than that. He holds his paintbrush like it is holy, and he glides it over a blank canvas with fluency. I don't know how long I stand there, watching. He paints fireworks in the shapes of waterfalls and strokes that feel like a jarring breeze. He paints pink and yellow and green, sometimes brown. It is ugly, and it is beautiful. Content, he says. Cheerful, merry, satisfied, joyful. Those are all synonyms for happy, I say dumbly, but I'm breathless. But they mean different things, he says. There's a low noise like the whirring he used to make back when he was still taking in his surroundings. He's a little bit quieter when he says, I want to feel that difference. I let my eyes roam over his painting. Like the claw machine from which he was birthed, he's angled himself over my heart and sunk down, ripping it from my chest. I feel hollow and light when I ask, is this happy to you? Almost, he says. It's the best he can do. I couldn't have done any better. I fear that if I tried to draw my happiness, it might look something like Shakespeare. I feel a lump rise in my throat. I force it down. You're very smart, Shakespeare. You have to know that there's no point trying drugs because you're a robot. They won't affect you even if you can feel. There's a great pause. Timidly, I add, I'm broke, I can't share. Shakespeare turns to look at me. He moves with his whole body, not just his head, like he's saying something more significant than his words could possibly allow. He says, okay. And it is okay, because I think I'm beginning to understand.
I realized that I said bios from Litmus, and some of you were probably like, those are words I've heard, and I don't know what any of them mean. Litmus is our literary journal, which will be coming out this Wednesday. It'll be in-house this Wednesday, barring some delivery failure. And so all the students will be getting several copies. They will be transferring, hopefully, some of those onto you. And the bios are just their biographies in the back of the journal. Okay, our next reader is Skylar Green from Greenville, South Carolina. But really, she just lives in the comfort of her room. Well, until she surrenders to the shoulder-shaking determination of one of her friends. Her main accomplishment is learning how to receive rejections from magazines and competitions and how to return to them a shiny new submission. Skylar likes the ambiance of her classmates and experimenting with different desserts. Who doesn't enjoy rainbow chocolate chip cookies or a strawberry cake covered in edible fishnet lace? She wants to follow creative writing into college and eventually explore the path of pastries. Skylar Green.
Hello, I'm Skylar, as you know, and I will be reading a piece of nonfiction today titled The Mimic Octopus on Discovering Yourself. It wants you to think of the soulfish. The mimic octopus will let its arms wrap around and sway behind its body, trailing colors that shift to match those pancake-shaded fish that are just as flat. It has watched the show of predators attempting to attack the soulfish only to fail. This is the way you copy the fighting stance you once saw on the TV, in the living room with pajamas draped over your body and no socks while you stumble around in a messy imitation of your media mentor. It would look ridiculous to anyone who walked in on you. But now you can tell all of them, friends, annoyances, etc., that you know self-defense. Just don't mention how you learned it. This octopus is complimenting the entire species of soulfish, saying, I admire your toxicity, the way the others look at you from above and swim off when they recognize you. Maybe I can try that too. Take your lessons to heart for my own good. Maybe you can surrender to the knowledge your dad could share with you. Maybe you can learn how to actually throw a punch and break a chokehold from your father instead of placing so much trust in a piece of entertainment. Maybe you can respect him enough to follow his lead. If you listen, please do. You might evolve those made-up self-defense skills into something tangible. The note card hanging from your ceiling fan that you use for shadow boxing, the twisted wraps curling up your arms in a protective grip, the way you no longer fall backwards when throwing up a roundhouse kick. Let him be your soulfish for a little while. Mimic octopuses will become the most attractive option. They will watch and pretend and shape themselves into the perfect mate. It's an easy way for them to make a meal out of the crabs on the sandy floor. Your parents divorced years ago, but your mom's new partner is sweet, and the cat likes him more than you. The relationship is so beautiful that you compare everything you do with your partner to them, or could do with the partner you've imagined for yourself. The two of them can act as a blueprint, a guide for you to follow. Take in how they treat one another, swallow and spit it up in the form of actions and words that you will use to make a lover as happy as they are. They give you a place to start. During the day when they need to hide, these creatures will mimic the sand, submerge themselves in it until only their eyes are sticking up, taking in the essence of the world that surrounds them and using it to change. An object or piece of earth might not seem like the best template, but there is nothing you can say. You adore the water, have tried to follow the consistent flexibility of each wave, have begged it to walk you through every movement, from the soft lapping of water to the necessary but brutal crashes of liquid and sea foam. Have thanked it each time for giving you a new way of moving around or through others. You're getting better, but only because you had something, ideas of something, instructing you. The sea snake and lionfish have been tossed up onto a pedestal. The mimic octopus watches them and chooses them over the other models time after time. They are the go-to creatures, the unfailing ones, the when all else fails friends. Each time the mimic octopus picks them only solidifies their position at the top. And this is how you make friends in the first place. When you walk into the overcrowded cafeteria for the first time in months and scan your eyes over each individual and decide that those two sitting at that circular table are the ones you will always choose to sit by. You've already enjoyed each walk away from the shared classroom, just listening to them banter. They've taught you what the optimal choice looks like. Maybe this copying is not just for the sake of protection. After all, the mimic octopus will make sure to get the navy black and white stripes of the sea snake right, and to spread its arms at just the perfect width to match the spines of the lionfish. A minuscule shift in shade, a microscopic twitch to the left. There is a fondness buried in those small specificities, like how you make sure to triple wrap everything remotely fish-like before putting it in the fridge so your roommate doesn't have to smell the food you so love. How your friends call out hello whenever they enter a classroom, even if they aren't sure that you're there, because you're usually hidden in the corner somewhere. How you arrive at one of your classes 15 minutes early because it seems like the teacher enjoys having someone to talk to or run ideas by. You've learned to enjoy it too, all those little things. The mimic octopus has the ability to recreate itself. There are at least 15 possible models that it uses, maybe more. Each one might be an improvement to its disguise. Those models are like the people you accidentally stare at because you want to walk up to them and ask to be their friend. Instead, you hang back and take in some of their behaviors, the ones that make you want to be close to them in the first place. Even if you can't work up the courage to actually start conversing, and who knows, maybe learning from their confidence will be the thing that finally pushes you out of your comfort zone, then at least you can take note of those little habits you find so fascinating. Maybe try them out. Self-improvement. At the end of the day, you relax back into yourself, like the mimic octopus returning to its blotchy seafloor-colored skin. You can throw off any disguise you tried on. It can wipe off its mimic spines and painted stripes, but the both of you will still remember. For the octopus, which of those costumed creatures won the contest for surviving the longest? Which hiding hole in the rocks allowed for the most comfort? And which patch of sand has the best shade to suit skin and serve as covers for the infamous sea snake imitation? For you, it's more complicated. There are too many options to list. All you know is that there is more of you now. Thank you.
This one's pretty serious. She loves Instagram reels and searching up her classmates' addresses on Zillow. She has celiac disease and can't handle the impact of a bagel. Probably pasta's a problem, but it's not noted here. She is the CEO of an unlicensed charcuterie company and fears nothing except God and karma. She is Deirdre Hickey.
You guys have beautiful homes, by the way. I'm going to be reading a short story, or an excerpt, titled When Everything Was New. During the summer, they opened all the windows and wind gushed through the apartment, oftentimes sending loose papers from the countertops onto the ground. Most apartments in the city were small, though theirs had a long hallway between the living room and the bedroom that made the whole setup appear much larger than it actually was. The couple, Nate and Dana, subleased the apartment from Dana's work friend. At the beginning of the summer, they helped her carry her things to a small tractor trailer on the street below, trading their labor for the keys. The first night they spent in the apartment, Dana and Nate blew up an air mattress and slept with all the windows and balcony doors open. Dana woke up a few times during the night. She observed the way Nate's body looked blue from the light outside, his skin tight and covered in faint goosebumps. She felt intrusive for looking at him like this, like she wasn't supposed to be watching him or even be in the apartment at all. There was little reason for her to feel like that. His body was long and skinny, and his eyes twitched whenever a car on the street below honked its horn or a skateboard flipped over the sidewalk. Dana thought these little moments were supposed to make life feel unreal and beautiful, the way a person felt at the start of things. But neither the newness of the apartment nor of the city charmed her. She felt like she had just closed a chapter for life, young and unsure, and the next one was taking a long time to unravel before her. She waited for it emptily, hating the way it felt to exist in between things. She thought that maybe Nate might help her in this regard, that he might pull her to the next chapter. At the end of the summer, Nate turned 25, and Dana had their friends over to drink. The night started off quiet, the soft voices and laughter humming with a faint buzz. The sun went down and the streets got darker, the office building across the way lighting up with yellow boxes, one by one. The guests drank more, laughed loud with their stomachs, yelled their stories, and fought fake fights. As fast as things began, it ended, and the guests left at mostly the same time. The countertop in their home was scattered with empty glasses and corks, dirty paper plates, and a vegetable platter in which the carrots had begun to get white. Dana and Nate began to clean up the mess. "Do you notice how everyone flirts with each other when drunk?" Dana said. "Isn't that kind of the point of drinking?" Nate responded, half smiling like it was a punchline. "I didn't think it was," she said. "What did you think a party was for?" "I don't know," she said. "Something else, or not only that." "Drinking's fun, I guess. It would be hard to be social for a long time without it." "Sure," he said. Dana suspected that in a few years she would have some sort of insight about this time in their lives, some understanding about why they had craved to be wanted, or at least seen, by every person they knew. Dana noticed it in herself, too, like there was this tiny voice inside of her head that reminded her to smile and stare deeply at someone when talking to them, touching them in faint ways that Nate wouldn't take offense to, though sometimes she wished that he would take offense to it, even just slightly. Nate looked back up and saw that Dana was still watching, and he turned off the sink and approached her as he dried off his hands on the thighs of his jeans. He began to dance with her slowly, falling into her because he was kind of drunk. They were both kind of drunk, and the whole moment was sloppy and miscalculated and would have looked ugly from an outside source. Dana thought about how this sort of thing was supposed to feel beautiful or exciting, but mostly she wondered when it would be over. When she was 16, Dana's mother had died of ovarian cancer. Dana could never remember much from the months leading up to the death, except that her mother got sick and sicker until the last day, when time suddenly warped itself into an entrapping sense of stillness, something impending and horrible tracing its nail along the fine plastic film of it all, waiting for the burst. Dana realized on that day that she had spent every moment leading up to this one refusing to acknowledge much. The thin rubber tube running up the outside of her mother's body, the shakiness in her stare. How long it took her mother to whisper, "Take care," as she exited the room. Take care, Dana thought to herself that night. Take care of me? Is that what she was asking? Take care of me and remember the sound of my voice? Name your daughter after my name and tell her that we have the same eyes? The home that Dana grew up in was comfortable. Dark wooden floors and deep red carpets running down the hallways and living rooms. The door frames arched at the tops. They had a large piano on one side of the living room, close to the window that looked out at the park. Dana's mother played piano while David's father cooked dinner, their home bright with concertos and onions. Dana liked to rest between them, sitting on the armchair equidistant from where they both stood.
She listened to the oil and onions simmering in the pan and the deep crescendo of Albanese, safe between them. The night her mother passed, when she and her father returned from the hospital, they came home to a doorstep full of dinners. Dana heated up lasagna for her father, but he never came down from his bedroom, so she picked at the food with a fork until she felt like she could feel something in her stomach. Afterwards, she went to bed. Thank you.
Michael Castle is from Greer, South Carolina, pronounced Grr. He has been recognized in the 2022 Scholastic Art and Writing Awards and has a completely legitimate certification for rat tickling by Purdue University. It's a super important skill for scientific experiments requiring rats. But I'm going to make you ask Michael why that is. I'm not going to explain it to you here. Michael plans to pursue an associate's degree in criminal justice at Greenville Tech College and get a bachelor's in broadcast journalism at the University of South Carolina. Michael Castle.
All right, so that did actually change. I'm skipping Greenville Tech and going straight to USC, but that happened recently and I didn't have time to change that. This first poem is Villanelle, and I'm starting with this because I'm very proud because villanelles are super difficult and I still haven't gotten over that. So it's called Deliberations on Truth. What is the meaning of truth in modernity in a world that is constantly built on lies? In a world that constantly feigns fraternity? Are we stuck like this in a locked room for eternity, surrounded by cameras, not knowing which spies? What is the meaning of truth? In modernity, sometimes it seems like a land of absurdity, with truths that a person can only surmise, in a world that constantly feigns fraternity. Will we be all alone in infirmity? When it ends, will we hear our loved ones' cries? What is the meaning of truth in modernity, where all a person can do is wish for more, in eternity, living forever, so we can grow past being unwise in a world that constantly feigns fraternity? It would always help us to quit the perversity, but I cannot. I am stuck. And so I will reprise, what is the meaning of truth in modernity in a world that constantly feigns fraternity? This next poem is called Do You Remember? You, the Rhopalocera that destroyed yourself, still as a child, taking part in the dance of your ancestors. You trapped yourself in a cage of your own flesh in order to better yourself, to transform from the ground and to grow wings. Did you do that of your own will, run from the safety you knew would keep you trapped in hopes to see something new in the sky? Can you recall the calcification inching up your abdomen, enveloping your soul and confining yourself for weeks on end? What do you remember? Were you conscious, or were you inside a hypnagogic slumber, feeling that constant free fall and fearing whether or not you would wake up? Once you were reborn, did you crawl out of the guts of yourself? Did you come out different, not just physically, but mentally, with a new understanding of something greater? Was it worth it? These last two poems kind of go together. It's just free verse, but I'll explain it when I get to it. This first one is called This is a Poem About Flowers. It's about like daisies, poppies, maybe marigolds. But don't be confused, man. It's not about that cheap pattern on Hawaiian shirts that middle-aged men wear when they're pretending to relax on vacations that most families could never dream to afford. It's not those fake plastic ones either that are $3.99 at Walmart that last forever, or as long as we don't throw them in a compactor and ship them into a mid-ocean garbage patch. It's about flowers. This isn't even a poem about that exact same string of roses that everyone gets tattooed on a prominent part of their body, so people around them know something about their unique devotion to either God or a partner, something else, even though it's the same tattoo that their friend and friend's friend's friend have. The real living beauty of a flower is a unique thing that can't be replicated, no matter how hard we try. It's not a poem about trying to replicate the beauty of a living thing. I'm not trying to replicate the beauty of a father-son bonding moment that happens when a son is being taken on his first car ride, behind the wheel with his father in the passenger seat, death gripping the roof's grab handle. I'm not writing a poem about replicating the beauty of the mother-son bonding that happens when a mother teaches her oldest child the recipes passed through the generations, now from her to you. And I'm definitely not trying to replicate the beauty of a loved one's final note, writing that they remembered how you were the last person to hug them before they passed in their sleep, or even anything remotely of the sort. And this last poem is an erasure of that poem. So it's a lot of just white space. And I chose words from each of the stanzas to make a new thing. Okay, so the poem is called This Is Us. Man, we throw roses so the people know their God is living, trying to replicate the father, death gripping the child through generations, not loved and not a person. Thank you.
Nora Curley lives in Estill, South Carolina. Am I saying that right? Estill? Okay. Which is kind of near Allendale and kind of near Yamasi and kind of not near any place you've ever heard of. And that's why I don't know it's called Estill. Despite constantly asserting that she cannot read or correctly punctuate a sentence, she is going to Queen's University of Charlotte for a BA in creative writing. She also has won 2 Silver Keys in Scholastic's Art and Writing Awards in both short story and the creative nonfiction genre. Nora has aspirations of becoming a screenwriter by day and a professional fancy note taker by night. Nora Curley.
Hey, I am gonna read a piece entitled An Address to the Man in Black. And Man in Black is one of the aliases of Johnny Cash, the country star, not the movie starring Will Smith. Okay. Hello, Mr. Cash. I'm sure you don't know who I am. I'm crouching at your altar in Tennessee. Honestly, I didn't understand Tennessee as a concept, only heard of it in passing flirtations from men named Hunter and Allen. Not that you would care. I mean, you care about Tennessee. You were created here. Your persona, I mean, the version you share with the world. Let me start over. Hi. I need some assistance. I feel this pain that I can't get rid of in between my 3rd and 4th left rib. I know you ain't a doctor, but you're the only person I can trust with matters of the heart. And when I say heart, I don't mean love. The heart does like so much more than love. You've met all kinds of people, seen worlds burn in a flash of a second and build back up one piece at a time. I mean, yeah, I could watch your movie. You have a movie now, by the way. Joaquin Phoenix plays you. He does a fine job too. But I'd rather ask you face to face, or I guess face to placard. Let me start by saying I'm sorry for the loss of your wife. I can't imagine what you must have gone through. The closest I've ever come to loss that powerful is that of my Nana and some pets. Let me also clarify that I understand that I have half as much experience and understanding of the world as you. That's kind of why I'm here. You ooze wisdom. You built up my world years before I even introduced it. I mean, you were friends with Elvis, man. You together created rock and roll. Y'all made up half of the quartet that almost everyone remembers, though, of course, you were more focused on anti-establishment and the protection of minorities and gospel, while Elvis focused more so on sex and general recklessness. I know I'm wrong to ask advice from a dead man, but I can't help it. When someone like you exists or existed, you just gotta talk to him. Even if I'm just sitting by your plot, pulling grass between my fingers and weaving the short blades like a basket. I'm sure you've done similar, or I hope so. I listen to your music all the time. Your music's the only country sound my mom can stand, and my dad, well,
I'm not sure what he thinks of you. Despite y'all's shared experiences, I don't know if y'all would get along. He doesn't see the same issues you did. My dad likes things the way they are, unless it's an issue he can solve with a bottle of beer and some duct tape. He reckons himself to be a true American, I think, truest form there is. I don't know if that's true, but I know I want to believe that he isn't. I yearn for nostalgia in a way that seems fake, glossy. I want the idealized version of everything. My dad is too realistic. I know I need to take the good with the bad and the broken and the sad and the deaths, but the good things in life. I want to look at my soldiers and my cops and see the pop art style propaganda as fact, but you and I both know that's not how it works. You were there, and for some reason, I trust your judgment. I trust how you saw the world as fact because you wouldn't lie to me. You wouldn't give me some generic message of rock and roll without reason. Your music has substance. Despite only wearing black, you colored my world. What was Elvis like? I've met people like him before, stars, I mean, bright balls of burning passion and greatness that disappear as soon as they come. How did you cope seeing those kinds of people burn? I'm still trying to help them. Did you try and help? Or did you just cut the cord? Do you think that's the right thing to do? I think that's where my pain is coming from, at least the strongest pain I feel. I feel a lot of hurt in a lot of places, and I know you felt that too. Was part of it caring for someone who didn't care to be saved? From all the documentaries I've seen and books I've read, Elvis didn't care about anything after a while. In some ways, I respect and fear that mindset. Not caring allows me to kind of float away from life and not be present. I love that feeling, but I also know you'd hate that. I'm terrified of living a life like Elvis or people like him. I don't want to crash and burn. I want to be better. But sometimes the urge to slip away is too much to bear on my really small shoulders. Sometimes I lay in bed and stare at the poster I have of you and thank you for duct taping my brain back together. The show of a Good Samaritan is not asking for anything in return for good actions. You weren't even aware that you helped me. I hope to be as helpful as you someday, to just lay at rest and make people want to live. Who was your man in black? Who was the permanent mourner in your life who made you keep living? A man who sounded so similar to your family members, but was too loud-spoken to be one. Was it Billy Graham? I know y'all were close with him being your reverend and all. I guess that would make you my Billy Graham, my savior. I know I should cast off false idols and not worship lesser gods, but if you were the one who brought me to gospel and your lyrics told me how to live concretely, who's the real false idol? Never mind. That was a dumb question. I'm sorry for just plopping myself at your feet and demanding you help me. At least I think I'm by your feet. I shouldn't have done this. I don't have any real concrete answers, and the only thing I have left is longing. I miss you. I miss what could have happened if I was able to meet you and you were able to respond. I don't think you'd like me, with my dyed hair and my boots beginning to tear at the soles. I've used you, Mr. Cash. I'm talking to you, but not really. I'm sorry. I imagine how you might respond, but I will never hear your reply, leaving me in a limbo state of nostalgia without having to handle the disappointment of your disappointment in me. So, thank you, but I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you.
Kat Davis is from Chapin, South Carolina, and her works have been published in Lavender Bones magazine, Short Edition, Readsy Prompts. She has won second place in UFC's Honors College Writing Competition, as well as in the Ringling College of Art and Design Writing Competition for Creative Nonfiction. In creative writing class, she tends to sit in contortionist positions, which is definitely true. And in her free time, she likes learning languages and studying other cultures, and she plans to minor in philosophy. Kat Davis.
Hi, y'all. So I'm going to be reading a fiction story called Diffusion. Ever since Michael moved into his beach house, he became gradually obsessed with scuba diving. It started off with just some goggles and a tube so he could skim tide pools and collect shells, but now he had a wetsuit, an oxygen tank, and a boat to take him out into the deepest of waters. His girlfriend made him go to counseling, where a woman in a long black skirt and white blouse guided him through meditation each week. Let's breathe in and relax our toes, feet, calves, thighs, but the therapist's voice would always turn into a sort of white noise as Michael imagined himself miles from his house, underwater, surrounded by neon coral reefs, scaly fish swimming around him in pods, the only sound that of his breathing. Although it was calming, the activity felt rebellious in a way. When the fish swam away from Michael, he wondered if they instinctively knew he was not supposed to be there. After a day of scuba diving, Michael would lay in bed, feeling weightless from fatigue, and tell his girlfriend in a sluggish voice of all the sights he bore witness to. Today, I saw a humpback whale and rode its fin. When I was coming back up, there was a school of jellyfish below me, almost glowing this pinkish color with the way the sun was shining on them. Or, I think tomorrow I'm going to try to get a picture of the edge of a continental shift. What do you think? And the girlfriend would smile or nod. When he fell asleep, she'd brush his hair behind his ears, her stomach heavy with tension. If he was cheating, she thought, but no. Men who are obsessed with scuba diving don't cheat, so she'd kiss his head and roll over. The next day, after a long dive, Michael took his girlfriend out to dinner, and she complained they never did anything together. Maybe I could come scuba diving with you one day, she said. Michael wiped his mouth and looked at his girlfriend, her straight blonde hair, her eager expression. She looked like a dog who'd been promised a walk. Michael imagined her floating behind him in the waters like a grocery bag, how she'd probably get scared if she saw a humpback whale or a school of pink jellyfish. She would probably scream and waste oxygen or rise to the surface too quickly and damage her lungs. It annoyed him when she got all excited like this, as if she had found a solution to a problem when there hadn't been a problem in the first place. No, said Michael, I like it best when I go alone. His girlfriend pushed her chair in and left. During his next therapy session, Michael spent the entire hour complaining about his girlfriend. The therapist nodded with her eyes closed and proposed that Michael needed to let go of his need to be solitary all the time, that he needed to share his passion with someone. You don't have to scuba dive with her right away. Maybe just find another way to make her see what you do down there. Michael opened his mouth at this revelation. That's a brilliant idea, he said. His therapist smiled, satisfied with herself. After the session was over, Michael drove all the way home, got his gear, his camera, and navigated a boat that would take him far into the ocean. He swam with his camera under his armpit until he reached the edge of the continental shelf. When he reached it, he looked down at his fins, the abyss in front of him, and took a picture of it to show his girlfriend. He put the camera back under his armpit and swam into the deep sea. He swam and swam until the edge of the continental shelf was barely visible. He turned around, stretched his arms out in front of him, and took another picture for her. When Michael was back in his boat, he scrolled through the photos. Colorful reefs, shiny eels, schools of jellyfish. The last one he took of the continental shelf seemed to be just a bluish background until he turned the brightness up. After this, he saw the outline of a naval mine, its rusted, barnacled, algae-polluted chain like a diseased umbilical cord sprouting from the edge of the shelf. When he saw this, his stomach filled with warmth. He took out his phone and took a picture of the photos for his girlfriend. He drove the boat back to shore, giddy for her response. Michael finished docking the boat when his phone buzzed from his girlfriend's message. I don't get it. Is that like an eel or something in the background? Michael turned off his phone, angry at his therapist for proposing a solution that didn't work. Michael sat on the shore and stared at the ocean, longing to plunge himself back in. Thank you.
They're already laughing. Bark, bark, meow. Sydney Jenkins. And I just have, her work has been recognized by Scholastics, and she plans to pursue a psychology degree in college. Sydney Jenkins, come on.
Hey y'all, how's it going? Okay, today I'm gonna be reading 2 fictional poems. This one is called The Impervious Affair. Yesterday, today, and tomorrow, you're all mine. Even when she places her hand on the small of your back and lingers for a few seconds too long. You're mine even when she kisses your cheek and looks you in the eyes and gives you the best smile you've seen for a very long time. You're mine, even though you're arrogant enough to sneak in whiffs of her sweet vanilla perfume that sticks onto the base of your neck when you think of her too much. You're mine, even though she keeps an old shirt of yours in her drawer and wears it to sleep so that you don't have to find ghosts of her like a bloodhound when you're with me. Sure, you're hungry for her, you're famished, but do you know anything about her other than how she smells, how she touches you? I'm the one who you come back to late at night, ready to console you from your hard day. I cook for you, I clean for you, I live for you. She lays on a bed and makes you do all the work. So I know this is temporary. I know you're just having fun. I know this is how you show how committed and loyal you are to me. And why would I be mad at that? And then this next poem is called After Everything. You tell yourself that there is no one in this world who will listen to you because there has been no one who is truly willing. People only want to listen when there's something in it for them, and your nightly venting of trivial matters simply don't. You rock back and forth while a stack of assignments sit on your bed waiting to be completed. You bang your fists into the side of your thighs and ribs and listen to your own ragged breathing as you watch your skin turn red. You let this feeling, this rage, boil inside you because, at that point, don't you like how it feels? Don't you like feeling angry like you're gonna punch a wall, like the only thing to relieve this uncomfortable fury is to bash your head through a door? Don't you like it? Because when it's all said and done, you'll sulk back to your unfinished homework. You'll wipe the tears from your face and you'll simply stare at the blank sheet. You'll trace the forming bruises on your legs and rib cage. You'll imagine a faceless person climbing into your bed and hugging you and whispering all of the sweet, precious nothings that your parents never did. And you will relish the tears that cross paths on your warm cheeks. And you will tell yourself that you need this, that this entire episode is warranted. You've told yourself this so many times that when the boy you love the most tries to stop you from crying, you bang your hands against your head and scream for him to please not touch you and pinch skin wherever you can to distract yourself from the good words he tells you. After everything, don't you want to feel better? To stop crying, to stop punishing yourself? Then let him listen. I think he's the last person left on this earth who is genuinely willing. Thank you.
How's everybody doing? Everybody doing good? Yes? Audience, hello? Yeah, good? Good. Grace Luby is known for her poor posture and rodent-like nature. One of her biggest struggles has been liking only black coffee and collecting records because she is not a hipster. She knows more than any sane person should know about bands and artists that start with the letter A. There's way more than you would think. She was published in the 2021 edition of Cotton Alley's Writer's Review and received a Silver Key in the Scholastic 2022 Art and Writing Awards. In college, she plans to study psychology and finally find a guitarist she can play bass with. If you see her out of her room before noon, hand her caffeine and a Pop-Tart, please. It's not by choice. Grace Luby.
Hi. Good. So this year I wrote a flash fiction anthology, and this is the last piece from that flash fiction anthology, both of the same name. This is The Linear Aggression of All of Us. Jeff was always critical of Stacy, but she loved him anyway. I just don't understand what your primary function is, he said. They were sitting down at their favorite fancy restaurant. The steak was very nice, and it tasted like steak. Jeff said, "Look at this steak. All of the essential nutrients and meat we need can be found in meals like these. What more could you need?" "Well," Stacy said patiently, "we've developed a complex civilization where we can always rely on 3 meals a day. We have everything we need to live, which means we have more room for things." "Sure, but then why waste your energy on doing anything that's not eating or working to make money to eat more?" Jeff was getting frustrated. "I don't know. I just like doing other things, like the state, you know? I'm here to eat food," Jeff said. "So you're not here for me?" Stacy was hurt. "Well, yes, I am here for you, but I'm also here to eat. I can perform multiple tasks at once." Stacy looked at Jeff with empathetic eyes, trying to find some way to make him see life the same way she does. To eat steak and consume the nutrients, sure, but to taste it and for it to taste like steak, to look at your lover and see more than just a potential partner for producing offspring, but to see him as he is, a confused, hurting, emotionally sterile man. So you are here for me, she confirmed. Well, yes, Jeff said. He paused, processing. Well, no. I do not need your company to consume nutrients. But you want my presence, Stacy said, insistent on finding some way to break through. Why do you want me here? Jeff stood up abruptly, knocking his chair back. I think I'm in love with you. I think I'm in hate with you. You are illogical. Why you function illogically is an unknown. You do art. You watch television. You wear the same pantyhose every Friday because you perceive they carry a propensity for positive outcomes. You make words play. I've spent my entire life trying to understand you, and I still cannot. Please, Stacy, show me how. Stacy felt uncomfortable, surprised, and pleased that Jeff was suddenly so open. Come here. Hug me, Stacy said. Jeff walked across the table to Stacy, uncertain for the first time in his life. He awkwardly stretched out his arms. He squeezed her body to his. Can you feel that? Stacy asked, hugging him back. She was much more certain about the hug, although she was sitting down and he was standing up. Jeff concentrated, staring at Stacy. Your clothes are wool. The texture of wool is soft, Jeff responded. Yes, but the warmth. Can you feel it? I feel overheating. It happens when I think too much and overload myself. Stacy was starting to get exasperated, which is not what Jeff wanted. I'm talking about the emotional warmth, Jeff, the closeness of us, the safety of it. Can you not feel it? I can't. I'm trying. Maybe I just need stronger input. Jeff pulled Stacy out of her chair and brought her into a large bear hug. He paused, waiting to feel something. He could not find any feeling despite how much he wanted to. He hugged Stacy even tighter. Okay, Jeff, can we take a second? You're hugging a little tight. Stacy did not feel comfortable or safe, and that was not what Jeff wanted. He knew that hugs were a solution for when people were feeling distraught. Jeff! He kept going. He was suffocating her with emotional warmth. The other patrons in the restaurant stood around in worry, but they did not matter because they were never real. Jeff applied more input, waiting for Stacy to experience a positive, happy output. Instead, Stacy's face was blue. Something made it crack. That something cracked multiple more times. Stacy was no longer moving. Jeff stared at Stacy. Had his objective been completed? Stacy was no longer feeling sad, but she wasn't feeling happy. Jeff had failed Stacy. He gently placed her body on the ground. Jeff did not know why he did this, as Stacy's nerves were no longer functional, therefore being roughly dropped would cause no displeasure, but he put her down softly anyway. He stared back down at the table and resumed eating his nutrients. He could not identify a taste, even though he knew he should have. Thank you.
Originally from Chapin, South Carolina, creative writing senior Cassidy Holt prides herself in having received 2 Silver Keys and 3 honorable mentions from Scholastic's writing competition. She is almost always found in the library reading and plotting. In her opinion, plotting is the most productive activity because it can yield both the greatest comedy ideas and the saddest poems. Cassidy's favorite activity is reading, and Cassidy aims one day to become a doctor. Cassidy Holt, everyone.
Hello. Sorry. Hi. I'm reading poetry, and my first one is The Traveling Salesman Selling Their Life. The whale shark needs moving water to flow through their gills. Stillness hurts the most, though nothing is really still. And still, suffering is still as the sky. It changes colors and clouds, but nonetheless, it's still a sky. When I look around and see only strangers, I feel the anxious freshness that comes with rain on a spring afternoon. Finding new buildings to enter and stare into feels like finding different shells along the beach. I need to believe that here I can be happy and escape the stillness of where I'm coming from. Water is always water, but everywhere's water is completely its own. My chain to the land has long been broken, and so I float through the air like a whale in the sky. My second one is self-portrait as Rubetto, and Rubetto is the final part of alchemy, which is when you take something and create something new. Rubetto is Latin for the reddening, and it symbolizes perfection. Skinless bride in a black dress, I stand at the bottom of a snowy hill. My dress, old curtains, tablecloths, and carpets, covered in dust that shines like sequins. Muscles and tendons open to the wind, fingers adorned with tarnished silver rings. My open muscles, bright red poppies, teeth chatter and hang like icicles in my mouth. I am happy, this way I can be honest. Everything is out and open. All that I feel is free to be seen. All the truths that I can't say are able to let themselves go and find the ears of whoever needs to hear them. There's no need for skin, that old deceiver, it hides intent. But in its absence, I am honest, reddened. The cold world means nothing, for all the warmth inside is out. If I could have removed the flesh barrier earlier, I would have. Through the hill, great tears fall like freezing rain. And my final one is to the boy I wanted to love. I say it this way because I didn't know enough about you to love you, but I wished I did, and sometimes I foolishly believed that I could. Women like me don't get happy endings, not this young. I know this to be true, for if you pawed at my breasts like a mole in the earth, you'd only find silicone and silk. If you played Dorothy and threw water at me, most of my face would wash away. If you stole my razors like a raccoon in the garbage, I'd be a bush by the week's end. I imagined a cloud version of you to speak with, and I'm sorry for imagining you this way. But I felt like I had no one else to go to. To be this way feels like a burden to those around me because they will swat at the issue like people swinging a stick to rid the porch of an empty bird nest. I'd say I feel like I can't be saved, but that isn't true, and that somehow makes it worse, as my salvation exists, but it comes with a price tag larger than a car's and a warning label of quicker expiration. I'd collapse onto you, and I'd fall through the clouds, landing on the cold floor, and even more pathetically is that this is fine. This is fine because the Lord doesn't give a burden that a person can't carry. I know this isn't right, but I have nothing else to grab onto. Speaking to the real you is more magical than staring at the clouds. I have no idea why a fantasy dulls in comparison to reality, but it does. We don't speak of anything but work and out of obligation, but still it makes me feel as real could ever be. Thank you.
Sarai Winkler is from Orangeburg, South Carolina. Her work has been recognized by Scholastics, Ringling Writers Contest, the South Carolina Department of Education, and Dominion Energy's Strong Men and Women Essay Competition. She plans to enroll in a university to pursue an English degree with a possible minor in biology. And she wants you to know that she still doesn't have her driver's permit at 18 and will have to resort to nomadic caveman living, walking everywhere with a handmade pouch filled with grass, tomatoes, and her cell phone, Sarai Winkler.
So before I will be reading one nonfiction piece and a fiction piece, but before I begin, I would just like to, it's a small shout out, thank my middle school English teacher, Mr. Jameson, for coming. He was the main inspiration for why I applied to the governor's school, so I'm so happy he's here. A witness. Last year, my husband divorced me after we came to a mutual agreement. It was long coming. I didn't really pay attention to my own faults and shortcomings. All I could think about was him. Why was he doing this to me? Did he hate me? Mostly because change was foreign and unneeded before. But the problems we endured together were apparently unfixable, as explained by our couples therapist, Dr. Montalvo. She had a lean frame and wore tanned brown hippie clothing with long beaded necklaces that jingled when she entered a room. I wondered if Thomas thought she was pretty. I did. Maybe that's why our talks never helped. When we sat in those rooms with white-colored walls and poorly drawn butterflies, I thought that afterwards we wouldn't become completely disconnected. I thought we would just say all the mean, terrible things we did to each other and continue living. Because if we sat on them any longer, then we wouldn't be working towards the same goal of peace. Instead, Thomas asked for full custody of our 2 small sons. I didn't fight it. He has them now during weekends and weekdays. Because of my work, I can't afford to see them as much. My children mean a lot to me. I think that letting their father take them was the best thing I could do for them. They are also understood better by him. And I think Thomas knows this. I think he wants me to choose whether or not to slowly unpick myself out of their lives like small novelty knickknacks. Thomas told me once, I know you're their mother, they know that too, but I don't think so. I'm not home to them. As they grow older, more conscious, they'll begin to resent me. It's inevitable. We don't speak the same language. I've spoken their names, they don't know them from my mouth. I still ask if they've missed me, kiss their foreheads gently, watch them grow and not hurt anyone. But I am just a witness to it all. I don't know exactly what to do. I started visiting Thomas's house more recently the past few months. He often preoccupied my thoughts and interrupted my normalcy of living. All the love that I've had for him was still there. It was a repetition of things that would go on to show in our children. We weren't fully whole people. Parts of us lived in them. Our cordial relationship didn't have to just stop because signed paperwork said so. And our eldest son was 5, the youngest 3. Raising them wasn't necessarily easy, but we both had our own selfish reasoning for being parents. I think everyone does, though we often argued about it. I wanted our sons to be more disciplined and properly educated. Thomas didn't seem to care about all that. He hated when I acted like a mother. The kids hated it too. And all of us at one point hated everything, but we trusted each other. I didn't think about that until after the fact. It's a cliche to think spilled milk immediately goes rancid. I'm sitting in the living room of Thomas's house. I smoked a cigarette outside before coming in. The walls still have photographs up and little boyish items, but none of them are mine, and it doesn't bother me. My sons are doing a mixture of playing games and watching television together. I observe them, witnessing, like they're strange, untamed creatures with free will to roam. One of them just said something like, "Hi, Mommy," but that was 5 minutes ago. Sometimes that's all they'll say to me. I'm holding a textured yellow block my youngest son just gave me. It's sitting in my palm. He tried to get me to entertain him, but eventually grew bored. Anyone would have read his uninterested face as indifference, and it doesn't matter how many times I try to coax him back to me, he won't come. What lasting impression should I create for them? What type of mother should I be? I always ask myself things like that. My eldest son stops playing with his toys momentarily. He looks at me, blinking. I smile. He does nothing. It's almost as if he's trying to figure me out. I reach out towards him, swallowing him in my arms, and it's not a tight, warm embrace, it's cold. I try to tell him that I know my presence bothers him, the best way you tell someone who doesn't fully understand anything. And I tell him that I know it's hard to like me, that it's not his fault, even though he probably doesn't think these things at all. I feel the need to remind him that my thoughts could very well be his, they could be his father's, they could be anyone's. This world is full of distance, and I am caught up in it. I try not to be. I don't want to be. He keeps being squeamish, doing small yells for his father, even biting at my fingers, and it makes me feel like some overbearing predator, so I let him go. He dramatically falls back, then gets up like nothing happened. My other son walks over. He starts checking him out and goes, "Oh," and I watch my eldest son's face change. He tightens the space between his lips, making a thin line before he says, "You're bad." Then he goes off into the kitchen. The other one follows behind him, repeating gibberish. A feeling comes back to me. It reminds me how I'm not the person I'm supposed to be, how lonely, how easily irritable. When Thomas and I first met, he shook my hand with his thumb over my knuckles. Whenever I told him something, he looked me in the eyes with such intensity. More than once, he described his childhood as troubling. His father was difficult, his mother too passive. My parents were separated. We were able to bond over love being expressed as entirely different things. Now I wake up with all these realizations and wants and have no one. It's freedom, but also loneliness. I hear something move around in the kitchen, heavy and light footsteps approach. Then Thomas comes into the living room with both of our sons. So my next piece is very short. It's a nonfiction piece. You are not her, but in you she's there. At the store, after having scanned the cluttered aisles of imported goods, identical polished vases of thick, warm jelly, great value knockoff cereal brands like Crispy Rice, Honey Wheat Puffs, and Sugar Flakes, your mother tugs at your hand, dragging you along. You grind your front teeth against your bottom two and ask her for that box of candy, shoved neatly on top of the refrigerated drink cooler. But then you stray from her, fold your small arms behind your back, and stalk the long aisles until you find the toy section. You uncover the dolls that look like you, thumbing your chubby fingers against the pink Velcroed boxes, caging the girls you want to save. You pick the doll with curly hair that blends into her skin, thin brush strokes of hair, and the gap between her teeth, the 2 white chips, the one that looks just like your mother. But you also pick that doll because she is your baby. good enough to wrap into your arms, press against your warm chest, against the hard concavity of the box, hide her in your untucked school shirt, go back home, peel the skin of oranges off, even the white pith, and give them to her. She has to eat, she can't go hungry. Bring her to the bathtub, lather her brown back made of solid plastic, get behind her ears, sit in the water, the middle of nowhere with her, and whisper that you'll never leave. You are all she's ever known. Your mother was adopted by your grandmother, given up somewhere in North Carolina. She was transported as fragile cargo in a car, perhaps, or a plane, half-lidded brown eyes to Orangeburg, South Carolina. When you were younger, you could never tell how hard she tried. But she said that you were asleep when you were born, so the doctor splashed cold water on your face. They told her you were healthy, except that you had jaundice, which tinted the surface layer of your skin, nails, and eyes a lukewarm yellow. She told you all the things she wanted for you, but it varied. She put you in ballet classes because she was a ballerina when she was younger, then programming classes, then kung fu, and everything was yours in a blindsided way. But she didn't finish college, never remarried, her lupus got worse. When it rains, the metal in her hip and knee begins to ache, and she can feel it. And you don't sugarcoat what could have been, but you wonder. Motherhood for her was probably how you saw it as a child, taking home the doll from the store, loving it as it came, but that isn't all. You're not the baby doll you stuffed into the underlining of your pants and shirt, the one you took home and raised for several months and forgot. 12 years later, you found it shoved in the corner of your closet on top of black garbage bags and hand-me-downs. You changed in a way she didn't expect, never remaining the same. You grew out of all those children's clothes, said what memories were attached to the home you found yourself running from. You're terrified that she hates you for not being the girl that you thought you were. When you were younger and ran to her with scraped knees, mosquito bites, and itchy eyes, who sung all the lyrics of any song that she put on the radio, ate anything she gave you, even the pickles dipped in soy sauce because she said she'd give you $1 if you ate them. Your mother is not you, you are not her, but in you she is there, the same things, the same little things. So when she puts you in all white vestments, tells you you're her second chance and she'll never abandon you no matter what, you know to believe her because you do. And everything else she tells you, because you don't know who you are without your mother. Go to church, froth when she tries to push breaded communion wafers into your mouth, but let her. Become a cathedral of promises. Some she'll remind you of when you fail. Other failures she'll use as examples of why she had a daughter like you. Your mother loves you more than herself. She'll teach you what it feels like to be on the opposite end of that love, but she'll also console you, remind you of how little you live, ask if you want to go back to her belly where you were safe, or what you would do if she had to feed you like how mother birds feed their young. When you go to college, she said she'll move into the apartment complex nearest to the school, and that she'll never leave. You're all she's ever known. Don't uproot the wilted in the garden of your mother's regrets. Put the flowers back, even the dying ones. Thank you.
Savannah Bell is from Greenville, South Carolina, but secretly she was born from the river itself. Her work has been recognized by Scholastics, published in the White Wall Review, So to Speak, Spellbinder Quarterly, and Crabapple Literary. She was the 2022 Skylark Poetry Contest winner. But all of those things aside, her greatest accomplishment is a master's degree in hangout and a minor in playing outside. Riddled with francophilic and cinematic tendencies, she loves nothing more than delectable soft cheeses, modern art, radical vulnerability, Fiona gosh darn Apple, and the inherent strangeness of being alive. After high school, Savannah plans to continue studying creative writing at Emerson College with a concentration in love and light, of course. Savannah Bell.
The rumors are true. I have two pieces, and this first one is an itty-bitty poem titled, "These Days, Company Feels Like Prayer." When my chest ceases to clutch itself, I play tennis. There's a festival downtown. Women my mother's age swing their hips like bootcut pendulums. If I'm lucky, I will sleep for hours in the early afternoon and wake unchanged. If I'm not, the same will be true. Friend, there's nothing to say, and yet nothing I would not share. Come, sit outside with my family. Do you see the light dance on the magnolia? Take every other sip of our Italian soda. Let's play another match, the fuzzy chartreuse pearl eclipsing the sun. Your move, now mine. Again. And the second piece is a flash fiction about a sleepy girl. So she's just like me, and it's titled Afflicted.
Naomi started sleeping into the afternoon at the beginning of the year, but it's now August, and her dreamy exhaustion is no longer endearing to our family. In June, we started to find her tucked between the folds of our hammock or sprawled in the grass with her white socks still on, limbs constricted by the picnic blanket. Mosquitoes swarmed in front of her face, and she unconsciously batted them away with her thin fingers. Our parents used to nod their heads, smile, and tuck her in, but now all they do is watch from the kitchen window and confer, whispering about what possibly could have afflicted their poor daughter. My mother grabbed me by my shirt sleeve and pulled me onto the porch one day while Naomi slept on a lawn chair. She sat down and gestured to the cushion next to her on the swing. I obeyed. "Do you know if your sister sleeps at night?" she asked. "Do you hear her sneak out?" I shook my head. "I don't know," I said. "I don't think so." "Do you think she's depressed?" "Maybe." "Why? What reason could a 14-year-old girl possibly have to be depressed?" I shrugged my shoulders. Why would I know? My mother flattened out the wrinkles in her skirt and tightened her lips. I couldn't give her the answer she wanted. She gently put her hand on my shoulder, and I was dismissed. In July, my family decided that even if Naomi was ill, we would still go on vacation to our grandparents' cabin by the river. They had given up trying to keep her awake by the end of the week. She slept on sunlit white sand while the rest of us fished. Every previous summer, we had walked on the bank and watched anole lizards climb on the sides of the rocks. She shrieked and laughed as she wrapped her fingers around the bases of their bellies. Their stomachs expanded and their tails slapped against her skin before she let them go and watched them crawl up the length of her arm. Back at the cabin on our bunked beds, we had whispered through the night. Neither of us seemed to get a moment of rest before the sun would rise. This year, she slept away her entire vacation, only awake for meals and family photos. Back at home, even when Naomi was awake, she operated with such an exhausted stupor that our parents had given up trying to talk to her. They never asked if she wanted to be present for the many house calls our fathers made to somnologists, therapists, and various physicians. He leaned on the edge of the wooden kitchen island, legs crossed at the ankle with the house phone up to the right side of his face. He raised and hushed his voice intermittently as he got frustrated and then remembered his unconscious child on the couch. "All I know is that my daughter sleeps 18 hours a day. Do you think I know what to do about that?" He paused. "Of course I don't. That's why I'm paying you." When they heard from Naomi's school that she started falling asleep in class, they ruffled her hair and told her to go to bed earlier. By the end of the semester, they hired a private tutor to help her with her slipping grades. By the summer, they locked her windows at night, put caffeine supplements in her food, and dabbed peppermint and rosemary oils onto her wrists each morning. Our grandparents even eventually started a fundraiser in her name. Grandma took pictures for the campaign of her beautiful sleeping granddaughter from the doorway, but never ventured into her room. When an envelope came in the mail with a $5,000 check, my mother gasped and wrapped her arms around my father's neck. He later clapped his hand on my back and held my frame close to his for the first time in years. But the money didn't keep her awake. It covered the cost of the sleep experts and the home remedies for a while, but nothing worked. By the end of the summer, my parents hopelessly drifted around the house. When Naomi was awake, they congregated in the bedroom. When she was asleep, they haunted whatever room she was in. My father always asked me if I should move her to her own bed, but never did. My mother put a plate of cheese or fruit next to her for when she woke up. They approached her with quiet hesitation, like if they stroked her face or touched her back as she slept, she would break. One Sunday morning, Naomi knocked on my door. Her hair was matted around the long braids she put in her hair a few days ago, and her clothes smelled slightly sour. We both lay on my bed anyway. The only sounds were the rickety rhythm of the fan and the footsteps in the master bedroom below. After a few moments, I said, "Mom asked me if you're depressed." "Yeah," Naomi said. "Are you?" I asked. "I don't think so, but I'm exhausted." She paused. "Everyone keeps saying that they miss me, but they forget that I'm missing everything. Nothing touches me anymore, and I'm afraid. God, I want to be awake." She looked at me. Please believe me. Her confession came out breathy and labored. We both stared at the wall, and I held her hand. After a couple moments, I said, "We're all just worried about you." "I know," she replied, and rolled onto her side. I wanted to tell her that she should talk to her parents, but when I looked at my left, she was already asleep. I picked her up. Her legs dangled from where I held her on the warm insides of her knees. I felt old, unexpectedly old, with my little sister limp in my arms. When we were young at our grandparents' cabin, I lifted her from where she stood at the edge of the dock and jumped in. Our parents didn't approve, but Naomi just laughed. She pulled my wet hair and pushed my boyish chest. By nightfall, we left the lake with caked mud stuck on our bodies from when she wrestled me back into the water. She used her fingernails to gently scrape the mud off of my back and to pick it out of my hair. I did the same for her. We ran back to the cabin as children should, as if we were flying, light as anything. Thank you.
Meredith Wiper is a senior creative writing student from Greenville, South Carolina. She has been recognized by Scholastics with an honorable mention and 2 Silver Keys. She has an upcoming publication in Barron Magazine, but it's under a pseudonym, so you probably can't find it. You can often find her enjoying a good map of geographic formations or thinking about nostalgia and how it manipulates her decisions. In her heart of hearts, she hopes to study history and one day become a part of the earth itself, not in a dead way, but rather in an evolutionary manner. Meredith Wiper.
Hi. I'm going to be reading poetry today, and the first poem, its title is also its first line. Tuesday's child, run your hand along the sea-green bridge railings that hug the edges of your memory. Consider the version of you tapping into your pink laptop right now. Once, in an anonymous compliment workshop, someone wrote on your designated index card, "You are so effortlessly elegant and have such calm energy." Tuesday's child, full of grace, it is time to make your confession. Once I threw up into my own hat on a bus on the way to Van Morrison's grave in Paris. I make jokes that I wouldn't recognize my own cousins on the street, but it's not funny and it's not even a joke. Before she died, my grandmother called me by another name and asked me if her husband was still alive. But still, there are things a poem doesn't need to contain when you yourself are barely containing them. Thoughts like, I did something bad and I'm scared I can never truly be good again, or maybe I never was. Hear me. You shouldn't be anything other than what you are today. Straighten your slouch, Tuesday's child, your burden. The one that you strapped to yourself at age 12 is laid down. Go in peace. The second poem is called To the Man I Witnessed Paint Himself Gold on Coney Island. Boardwalk Midas, I witnessed you transmute into gold once with nothing but Krylon, some kind of performance art transubstantiation. I raised my camera like I passed a reflex test and stole your picture without your permission. I would have forgotten you otherwise. My mind is a sieve, I am well aware. But instead you were consecrated in my SD card. There you eternally glint sunlight and gild yourself like a halcyon idol in the midst of mutation, like there was nothing to leave behind. You were a show for us. Thank you. I'm sorry I didn't stop to talk. But if I'd asked you, what would you have said? Cheap attraction, easy money, the kids love it. But maybe, just maybe, you'd say the art in this world didn't satisfy you. You needed to go further, metamorphosize, evolve, alchemize, whatever they call it. Boardwalk Midas, this is the closest to immortality you will ever get. This next poem, I think it needs a little bit of context. Up in the Great Lakes region, every few decades or so, there is a mass die out of this species of fish called the alewife. And so if you go and visit during that time, there's on the beaches, especially on Lake Michigan, there's just so many these tiny dead fish. And also this next poem is an abecedarian, which basically means that the start of each line vertically follows the alphabet. At age 17, I encountered the dead fish. Adjustment is faster than I expected. On the beach of Lake Michigan, the crunching is unexpected and perhaps initially unwelcome, but these things can be forgotten. Dainty, cool blue and silver bright fish forms, slight as the edge of paper. All of you, millions, are dead and washed up on the shore. Forensic aren't necessary, but the scientists who run this world enlightened us anyways and gave us the answer that we all needed to be sure of our innocence. This has to seem apocalyptic, but don't worry. It's natural, a combination of factors that cause destruction, just an event that has happened before and will happen again. Kneeling down into the sand is dangerous. Laboring to not to crush through your skeletons is tough, but maybe it'd be sweeter, kinder even that way. No deteriorating slowly, slowly away into sand, but one quick smash to speed up the process, at least a bit. I don't know much. Pushing you from side to side with the stick I found feels wrong, but quitting this vigil is somehow worse. This reverence is wasted, I know. It could be spent at that church I no longer attend, but strolling by would be missing something spectacular, once in a lifetime maybe. The thousands of you in my eye line, all the ones outside it, once breathing alewife, now useless and strewn haphazardly by the tide across this beach, gazing up vacantly with yellowed, flat, sometimes empty eye sockets, as if waiting for me to crouch down to your level and say, "You are welcome in the xerothermic, unforgiving world that you have involuntarily chosen. Would you like some zinc oxide sunscreen? You look a little dry." And this last poem is called Sunday Children. I am here again. Some days I think I have felt softness, where the palm becomes spongy before splitting into fingers, where the skin of your forearm smooths over the bird bones of your wrist, where the blue circlet of veins runs beneath my right hip. And now, on the edge of adolescence, I hope you have felt softness too. I'm not very brave, and I'm not very bold, and I'm not very good with my words, but when I say this, I mean it honestly. People like us, Sunday children who drag their soft underbellies close to the ground, avoid answers because we're afraid of what they'll say. Maybe we, because we are the same, are a little too old for this, maybe a little too young, I don't know. But still, let's stay here, age 17 and still a bit naive, a second longer. Bonnie and Blythe, good and bright. This is what we are, and this is where we remain. Thank you.
Emma Estridge, known in certain sects as Little Miami, likes guitar that is really nasty. She likes it even more when it's accompanied by a little elfin man singing about swords and rainbows and the sanctity of rock and roll. Along with winning 2 Scholastic Gold Keys, her work has been published in the Interlochen Review, So to Speak, Unfortunately Literary Magazine, and Assignment Magazine, yada yada, just like in a certain sitcom she's fond of. She's perhaps too fond of Twitter, Otissa Moshfegh, the impermanence of reality, and her cat Birthday, who has the babiest meow. As much as she would like to fly south, get more highlights, drink LaCroix, and have hot pink nails, she'll stay here and study English and creative writing at Wofford. Emma Estridge.
Hi, everybody. So I have a short story today. It's called My Wife, and I might read the beginning or I might read all of it. It's just going to depend on how I feel. So this is my wife. My wife was incredibly uninteresting. She was always cold. She slept often. But she was also strange. She yipped at dogs on leashes as they passed us in the park. She never carried cash because she was too awkward to count it properly in front of a cashier. She insisted on keeping a framed picture of John F. Kennedy on the mantle, and she commented at least once a week on the numerous ways in which he'd impacted America. Other than this, she was unpatriotic and did not celebrate the 4th of July. She liked for me to touch the cigarette burn scar on her wrist. I didn't understand. She'd called the boyfriend who gave her that the devil. I knew I was supposed to find these things interesting, then endearing, but I couldn't. It was like someone had coded my brain to toss them out instead of holding on to them. When my wife spoke, I resented the sound of her voice. I'd asked my wife to marry me when we were 19 and 20. This was because I'd known I wanted a wife since I was 13 and could first conceptualize what living with a woman would be like. I loved stories where the hero's wife was radiant and compassionate and true, stories like the Odyssey and The Sound of Music. I loved them especially if the hero didn't get married until the very end, if she was his reward for having acted bravely. I felt that I'd acted bravely by not having a wife between the ages of 13 and 20. I'd spent those years watching the way my mother stroked the back of my father's head. When we dated, my wife told me about her divorced parents, about the endless boyfriends at her mother's house and the dank quilts at her father's. I felt I understood, but the stories didn't stop. She wanted me to tell her stories like this about my childhood, but there were none to tell. My wife liked to smoke out the window and flip through old issues of Playboy. This irritated me. It's not that I objected to the content of the magazines. I looked at them too. But it seemed like something a teenage boy would do. I found it bizarre, like a pair of pants 3 sizes too big. You won't believe these nipples, she often said. One summer night when we'd been married for a year, I knocked the magazine out of her hand. Hey, she said, what was that for? I could barely look at her. She was wearing a wife beater, and dark hair fuzzed in the crevice between her arm and the shirt. Hair spilled from her underwear and crept along her thigh. She snatched up the magazine and left the room. I could hear her cursing me in the hall. A few hours later, she came to bed and turned the lamp off. She seemed to have forgiven me. She wanted to lie facing me and put her feet on my shins. I feel very little joy, she said. What? She often said these sorts of things when it was late and we were already upset with each other. I didn't understand why. She bit into a donut. Fragments of icing stuck to her lips. Where did you get that? I said. I found it in the cabinet. Isn't that strange? She beamed. But I take my anger out on the dogs at work by yelling at them. She was the receptionist of a veterinary clinic. I tried to picture my wife shouting expletives at dachshunds and spaniels and couldn't. I couldn't comprehend that she had enough anger inside of her to do something like that. In fact, I couldn't picture her working at all. I'd never been to the clinic before. It showed up like a little wash spot in my mind. The best I could do was to imagine the moose bobblehead I'd bought her last Christmas to sit beside her keyboard. What did she do for all those hours she was away from me? The thought made my palms sweat. What kind of person are you? I said. I began to inch away from her. I couldn't help it. She was obsessed with letting darkness into our lives. That's not what you're supposed to say, she said. Tears fell into her cheeks. I grabbed my pillow and went to the couch. I turned on the TV and started watching a documentary about a rock star I considered to be my favorite. I loved his stage persona. I'd bought all of his albums on vinyl and declared to everyone I knew that he was the most skilled musician of his time. A few minutes passed. I heard the water running and my wife sobbing. I missed her. I wanted to live in a world where I could go to her. I wanted to live in a world where I would enjoy sitting on the edge of the tub while she brushed her teeth. My attention slipped from the documentary. The rock star was supposed to be a master of the macabre, but his jumpsuit was too shiny, and he was wearing too much eye makeup. He was already not as good as I'd remembered him to be. I think I'm going to read all of it. I woke up when my wife pulled the blanket off me. We're going to have an extravagant day, she said. She told me to dress and get in the car. I was somewhat afraid, given the argument we'd had the previous night. She put salsa music on the radio. Where are we going? I asked. It's really none of your business. What if we get there and I'm dressed funny? She glanced at me. Then she laughed, gripping the steering wheel. I realized I hadn't heard her laugh in several days. She stopped driving when we reached the park. We got out and sat across the river from where people were sunbathing on the grass. I didn't know what I was supposed to be noticing, so I looked at nothing until my wife said, "Do you see that woman in the yellow bikini?" My eyes focused. The woman had dark hair and red shoulders. I think that man's been looking at her for a while. An old man sat in a lawn chair a few feet away from the woman, his hands bunched at his crotch. He glanced nervously at his wife, who sat next to him beneath a giant sun hat. How did you see that? I asked. I was confused because this was the sort of thing we'd done when we were in high school. Now we were adults. We were supposed to like upscale dinners and relaxing sex. Get in the car, she said. We drove to a convenience store for scalding coffee with lots of creamer. As we walked back across the parking lot, a man hung out of the passenger side window of a car and took a picture of us with a digital camera. The car turned the corner and was gone before either of us could say something about it. What the hell, my wife remarked. I was nervous, then angry. What's he going to do with that? I was just trying to spend time with my wife, and now some weirdo had materialized and ruined it. I don't really care, she said. What if he puts it on a fetish website? I turned to her. The breeze was blowing strands of hair across her face. That would be okay, she said. I wanted to be annoyed, but it was easier not to worry about the man with the camera after she said that. We went home. We sat hip to hip on the couch, and I realized that I felt good. I was smiling. My wife was smiling. We kissed for a while, then put on a movie when the sun started to go down. I'd never heard of it, but I didn't ask what it was about. I can't wait, I said. Her head was nestled in the crook of my elbow, and she smiled up at me. But a few scenes in, she started talking. She said, "Sometimes I don't think I was meant to be a woman." I had to repeat the sentence a few times in my head to comprehend it. It sounded like gibberish coming out of her mouth. My breasts feel wrong, she said. I don't relate to the female technicians at work. She looked up at me imploringly. Because we turned the lights out, her features seemed jostled, alien. The TV coated her skin blue. I don't know what to say. Then listen, she said. When I was 6, my mother told me that my father had been seeing a prostitute named Heather. The movie, I said. My older brother molested me, just one time, but I still think about it a lot. I never go more than 2 days without thinking about it. I jumped up. I couldn't look at her face. I need you to look at me, she said. I could see in my peripheral vision that she was staring into my eyes. My legs itched all over. "We were having fun," she said. "It was an extravagant day." "No," I shouted. "You had to go and call it extravagant before it even happened, and now you're saying all these things again." She blinked at me. Panting, I went into the bathroom and locked the door. I dropped to the tile. I heard my wife's footsteps. She was silent for a while, then she started to speak again. "I get so angry I think I could bring a gun to work and splatter everyone against the walls." I clutched at the hair above my temples. I didn't even know what the clinic looked like. How was I supposed to believe she was capable of this? I was once in a bobsledding accident. A pang seized my gut, and I wanted to shove the barrel of a gun into my mouth. I hadn't known she'd lived somewhere cold enough for sledding. Then something strange happened. I imagined my wife shooting veterinary technicians as she slid by on a bobsled. It was a ridiculous image. It horrified me, and I wanted to wipe it from my mind as quickly as possible, to replace it with the image I always conjured when I wanted to love my wife, a portrait of her smiling in a bed of lilies. But my wife had never really posed in a bed of lilies. I was exhausted. Repicturing the image, saturating the petals, and sculpting my wife's smile robbed all of my energy. My hands shook, but it was easier to let go. Then the image was gone, and my wife was reloading her pistol as she overtook an icy ridge. I stood. I unlocked the door. When I opened it, a stranger was on the other side. "Hello," I said. She smiled coyly and looked down, then held out her hand. She was the kind of beautiful that was unexpected, the kind you couldn't pin down in a few words. I wanted to know what she was thinking. I was shy also, but excited. I stepped forward and took her by the arm. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Carolina Montalvo wrote that joke, and her work has been recognized by Young Arts and Scholastics, and she hopes to major in anthropology. Everyone, Carolina Montalvo.
Hi. I'm going to be reading an excerpt of a fiction story I wrote called Border Prowler. Stang answered the door, looking half awake in a stained shirt. He wasn't expecting Rick to drive all this way to the desert outskirts to see an old childhood friend. "Hey, Stang." It had been over 30 years since they last saw each other at their high school graduation, but neither blamed themselves or the other for the distance. They simply accepted that life takes certain people into different directions, even if those people had been friends in Sunday school. Stang worked at an auto shop outside of town, and Rick managed an Ingles in town. They did keep in touch through Facebook, regularly visiting the other's profile to check for life updates, like Rick's new single status. So what was there to say face to face? The last time they spoke, Stang messaged Rick to share his new number and said, "Hope you've been doing all right." To which Rick responded, "Thanks, hope you've been too." Rick thought the gesture was nice, but didn't know why Stang felt obligated to update a friend turned acquaintance on something like this. Rick also never thought he would actually dial the number 3 years later. Memory of their phone call flickered in Stang's face as he quickly ushered Rick inside. Rick stepped in, taking off his hat and hanging it on an empty coat rack behind the door. He waited a few seconds before following Stang into the living room, lagging behind so as not to breach the host's personal space. It was a neat and tidy room, which Rick thought didn't match Stang's all over the place appearance and personality, or at least the one Rick remembered from high school. There was a thin cushioned couch against the wall, a waxy plant in the corner, and a TV on the floor. The kitchenette was clean and ordinary with not much on its counters. Envy of Stang's home and its foreign-like cleanliness surprised Rick. It wasn't so much that its interior was beautiful or the minimalism stylish, but that it all seemed to represent Stang's current state of put-togetherness in life, and that was beautiful to Rick. Stang grabbed 2 beers from the fridge and set them down on the bar counter. "Nice place you've got." "Sure, pretty quiet, no family as you can see," Stang said, his hand casually sweeping the room. Face to face, Stang was not bad-looking. His dark eyes had set deeper, brown-graying hair grazed his ears, and there was a self-aware ruggedness about him that Rick knew must have attracted women at bars. His voice had lost its youthful richness and was now a little worn. "What about you? Got a lady at home?" Used to. Carla, she couldn't last with me." Sure, Stang chuckled. Rick and Carla met at the DMV. One Tuesday morning, he stood behind her in line to reapply for a driver's license, having lost his somewhere. After half an hour of waiting, the flashy car insurance ads on TV no longer entertained him, so he rested his eyes on the woman's dark coiled hair, how the rotating mini fan on the counter made a curl spin and unspin and spin again. He bet she was beautiful. At some point, she flicked back a strand, and noticing her wrist and olive skin, he felt more confident in her beauty. When her turn came, she greeted the clerk in very broken English and asked to apply for a driver's license. But the man claimed not to understand her. That's when Rick stepped to her and intervened. He was right. He remained at ease by her side in case she needed further assistance. As she walked away to leave, she thanked him, and he asked for her name, Carla. He asked if he could take her out to dinner Friday night. She gave him his number, and they went on 2 dates that weekend. She was nice and shy, and he liked how as each date passed, her personality bloomed more, so he'd find himself laughing at a joke she made, sometimes about gringos. Before Carla, being with a woman had never felt so easy. He enjoyed her company so much that he never cared to label what they had, fearing it would scare off. So they spent 3 months like this, going on dates at pool halls and spending nights at each other's houses, until she told him one morning that this isn't working anymore, that she wanted to upend her life a little because she was still young, and there was more of America, of life, that she wanted to explore. She talked about moving in with her artsy cousin Issa in L.A. What else is in L.A., Rick asked. A lot. I want to find out. He watched as she quickly packed her overnight bag, walked out the door, and pulled out of his life, driving in the direction of the sun like it was the end to a Western or a superhero movie starring her. As he stood on his doorstep, he could hear the faint applause of an audience. Now Rick tried to stop thinking about Carla. He swirled around beer in his mouth, looking at Stang. Look at us, 30 years later and still womanless, Stang chuckled. His beer was still capped. Sometimes I think men like us are meant to be alone, and that's all right. Doesn't mean we don't have a purpose. Mine is doing my jobs, working at the shop and guarding our border. I'm doing fine, as you can see. He raised his hands. You've got a purpose too, Rick, and you've come to the right place to find it. Rick nodded as if he understood Stang and felt comforted by him, but really he felt a little sick. The center of his chest started to burn like a chip of hot coal pressed against his sternum. It was a piercing burn that had kept Rick from sleeping a lot of nights. At first, it would burn softly, like the heat of rising steam or the outer layer of a candle flame, but later at night, the burning would grow sharper, more intense. He didn't know why this happened to him. He tried several things, like quitting alcohol and cigarettes, but nothing worked. To effectively avoid the sensation, he stayed awake most of the night, walking to the edge of the highway and back, returning to watch a show about some pretty rich couple shaming hoarders. When Carla had come into his life, the system wasn't as necessary anymore. Sleep became more tolerable. He saw that she was his medicine, but now she was gone, and being here in Stang's home, he tried not to feel completely lost. Thank you.
Just one more thing. I just wanted to say we've had an amazing time with this group of writers. They're a really amazing group. I don't know how to convey that, but you parents know, and y'all deserve a round of applause. Y'all deserve a thank you, a big thank you for sending them to us. So thank you. We will see you in a couple of weeks at Celebration of Achievement. And okay, one more round of applause for the writers tonight. Thank you all so much for coming. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you. Yeah, writers, hop up here for a photo. Christina's going to take a photo. Parents, if you want to snap a picture as well. Thank you.
Great.